We're all just too dumb for this world. That was the framing on ZDF yesterday. The people here in Germany who are hoping for a change in politics simply because they have less and less money each month and notice that everything is getting much more expensive. You probably still know it from things your parents or maybe even your grandparents used to say. Then you just get used to the prices. And it's exactly this exponential growth of these prices that the German taxpayer simply doesn't want to get used to anymore. That's why, among other things, he says when gas prices explode, well, then just let's see your ballot. At the same time, someone like Klusendorf tells you yes, but under Helmut Kohl, there was also a government spending ratio of 57%. So the CDU should just get used to that. But what he skillfully leaves out in that statement is that it was actually raised that high back then under Helmut Schmidt, who wasn't in the CDU, but with the Social Democrats. What the Social Democrats have always understood quite well is how to reach into people's pockets. And by now, the CDU is being isolated so much that they're ready to govern with the left. Why? Well, among other things, because of anti-Semitism. Antifa, which wants to bring suffering and hatred to this country. Helmut Kohl once commented on this quite well. He called these people neo-fascists. So far, so good. In this context, definitely. Now we have a political situation here in Germany that is unbearable for anyone. Now ZDF shows up with their so-called voluntary compulsory fees, as they like to call them, and they want to, yes, I really have to say it like this, get into our heads. Well, I don't want to say it out loud because, I'm not really into swear words and that's not really my style. But you just keep thinking throughout the whole day, after I want to record this video, that what the AfD is demanding, the political program in Saxony-Anhalt, is exactly what you want. Not 100%, of course, there are differences that I don't particularly like either. But you just think, okay, I already think it's pretty good that, among other things, the churches are being scaled back. Like, for example, Friedrich Merz saw today at the Catholic event. He will know exactly what I mean. He said again today, yes, in the political spectrum, you have to argue, and tolerance comes from tolerar. That means accepting the opinions of others. Yes, but also the opinions of those people who no longer agree with this policy. Of course, he sees that as an attack today. Accordingly, the door is being opened, well, for a left-wing party that even fewer people want. You just have to look at the election polls. At the same time, for example, corruption in the SPD is simply being swept under the rug. So there were also some reports yesterday under Pistorius, the most popular politician in Germany, that he only lets SPD party cronies move up und alle anderen benachrichtigen. You can tell I'm definitely not using any cutaways or clips in this video. Why am I doing that? For a certain reason, and actually for a very important reason. I want this video to be shown without any sources. There are no links below, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. Now that I've read through the reports, by the way, there are also no cuts. At most, I'll edit out if I'm silent for a minute. And I just want to share my thoughts with you about what is personally important to me. We're seeing more and more corruption being uncovered in Germany. On the other hand, we're giving billions in quasi-cash to Ukraine without any checks, where according to the latest findings from the Ukrainian anti-corruption agency, Zelensky is using it to build houses for himself. And we're paying for all this stuff, even though it's now been leaked by the European Commission that the corruption is widely known, and yet we're still giving out the money, right? At the same time, we're building weapons against an aggressor who has never actually targeted Germany. That's exactly when I start getting a stomachache. They're throwing around taxpayers' money as if there's no tomorrow, or as if there won't be a tomorrow for them. They're distributing taxpayers' money abroad, and here in Germany, people are arguing about it. At the same time, we're being silenced, just like someone from Weimar once now. And it's the social media algorithms themselves that decide who gets to see what. And here we've reached a point that's not just threatening, but a point that dictatorial regimes use to silence the population. And that's an issue that I just want to talk about openly and unscripted in this case, without anyone contradicting me. Of course, you can disagree with me down below. That's why I'm skipping it too. Leave me a like and a subscription. You know the drill, but we're not doing that today. But the problem is, no one in Germany can express their opinion anymore without having to deal with the fact that there are many people who will just tear you down. Whether it's the prosecutor's office, Antifa, paramilitary groups, or even the grandmas against the right. Someone always comes if you don't have the mainstream opinion, and they'll try to oppress you because being right wing is considered bad. And whenever you use right wing slogans, right wing propaganda, or even just, as I like to call it, yeah, opinions that were absolutely legitimate 20 years ago when everyone had the same opinion. Yeah, if you say that now, then yeah, you get associated with the left, with the leftist mob. If you ask at universities nowadays, a professor isn't even allowed to speak out against the left or against migration anymore. Otherwise, he immediately loses his job. Back then, for example, we had teachers who clearly said, yeah, all these Turkish immigrants here, if it were up to me, I would deport them. And as kids, we didn't really understand that. He always said that this was a conversation you were still allowed to continue. By the way, absolutely unthinkable today. What do I actually mean by corruption and this idea that it's now unthinkable? The moment you try to uncover what's going on here in Germany. Well, the government is already involved and manipulates the algorithms so that you don't get a platform anymore, so that people here can't listen to you anymore. For me, it was important to make this video and tell you this. We have a huge corruption problem. We have people who are standing up against this regime. And at the same time, yes, we have a public broadcasting service, just like, for example, Welt. Let's include them too, since they constantly want to tell us that we're sick. But all we long for is just one thing, and that's change. And secondly, we finally want more money in our wallets from all the hard work we've been putting in for so long. And yes, when I sometimes work 40 or 50 hours a week, I don't see why I should give a large part of that money to the state, only to then ask, hey, what are you actually doing with it? Oh, I'm not even allowed to ask because otherwise I'm considered racist. No, I don't like what the money is being spent on. Oh, then you're racist. And that's just what I wanted to share with you in this video. I don't know how you see it. Feel free to write it down below. I think this government is the end stage they've reached. We're seeing it in England now as well. Here is Dharma, who simply doesn't want to step down. And I believe that the CDU and SPD will soon achieve the same thing here. And that is, they have ushered in the downfall. When will that be? No idea. Maybe not until the end of this government's term. But by then, at the latest, nothing will be left of either the CDU or the SPD when they come around with their reforms in pensions, in health insurance, and people really start to feel what that means. Also with Bürgergeld, then support will decrease. And yes, even migrants will realize through the fast track naturalization that the SPD isn't actually that good, and they will turn to the other left wing parties. So, dear SPD, dear CDU, I believe you will never turn back. Why not? I believe you have so many skeletons in your closet that you've all carried along for years. You have lied to us, deceived us, and yes, led us astray. And for you, there's no turning back anymore. And I also don't believe that in a minority government, the AfD will participate in creating stable majorities. Why not? I saw that in Saxony. The AfD votes together with the Greens, and when asked whether there really was a vote, he doesn't see any majorities. Everyone should stand up again. And the Greens did not remain seated. What does that mean? Well, the worst moralists of our time are those who still claim their rights in order to move forward. And I think now is the time to file a constitutional complaint with the Federal Constitutional Court over this budget and to finally put an end to this government